All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my preview and prediction for Ole Miss versus LSU. Tigers, 1.5-point favorites. 66.5 is the over-under. CBS at 3:30 Eastern Time in Baton Rouge. LSU leads the all-time series 64-41-4. Kicking things off, this Ole Miss offense. It's been a pretty quiet unit, though, but they still have 500-plus yards, almost 41 points per game. Jackson Dart, he hasn't exactly made a very smooth transition here to Lane Kiffin's offense, transferring over from USC, completing under 62%, a little under 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns, 6 picks, 212 yards per game. He does have 371 yards rushing, but there seems to be a big drop-off from when Matt Corral was there, played with so much energy, was able to, just attack the seam, very seamless. It was just a very dynamic attack with Corral under center last year in more ways than one. I've not really seen that from this passing attack this year. They've only thrown for more than 215 yards once. That was 448 against Vanderbilt. Other than that, they've been stifled. Dart, 9 of 19 here against Auburn. He did have 3 touchdowns, but that's a game he completed under 50% in. They were not very good against Tulsa. 52% completion rate against Kentucky. This passing offense has certainly struggled, and that's no fluke. 7 weeks in, and they've not been too dominant, through the air. This run game's really helped this offense out immensely, though. 271 yards per game rushing. Quinshad Judkins, true freshman, 720 yards, 10 touchdowns. He's been just phenomenal for them. Grown man running the ball, 5'11", 210. They mix that in with Zach Evans, who they picked up in the portal, 605 and 7 touchdowns. He's a very good slasher. Judkins is more of the muscle guy. They also have USC's Bentley. He hasn't played much this year. I believe he's now injured, but they have those 2 dominant running backs. They've just allowed this offense to thrive. 448 yards of rushing against Auburn, 300-plus against Georgia Tech and Tulsa. Only had 186 against Kentucky, but they did have about 4.8 yards per carry, so they certainly showed up in that game as well. And, they're going to be leaned on to be big time in this contest against LSU. But I do think this passing attack certainly has the potential to continue to get better. Jonathan Mingo, 507 yards, 3 touchdowns on the year, on only 22 receptions. A couple weeks ago he had a big-time effort against Vanderbilt, had 247 yards on 9 grabs. He's been really good for them, 6'2", 225, one of the better pass catchers in the conference. Blake Heath, Jordan Watkins, Michael Trigg right after that. 3 transfers, all have 17-plus receptions. And then Jalen Robinson, I'm not sure what the status is on him. I'm not sure if he's healthy or what. But he's a good player for them when he's going to get on the field. A UCF transfer. I do believe he might be a little injured because I've not seen him play much the last few weeks. This offensive line, though, they've played very well this season. It's mainly, it's a mixture of some veterans and some freshmen, especially at the tackle positions. And then Nick Brocker, he's phenomenal left guard for them. Offensive line, I think, has played very good for Ole Miss. But, the passing attack, those vertical seam routes, they just don't seem to be executing like they were last year through the air. Jackson Dart has plenty of potential. I think he'll get there eventually, but right now, at this moment in time, certainly not there. Moving to the LSU offense. 33.7 points per game for them. Jaden Daniels, he's starting to kind of come into his own here. Mike Denbrock, of course, he worked with Desmond Ritter. And these guys are very similar in terms of size and skill. So, this is really it was a perfect storm, I think, for them to give him the starting job. Completing 69%, 10 touchdowns, 1 pick. Been very efficient with the ball. Team high, 6 touchdowns rushing, 403 yards. His legs for a good part of this season have really been the entire offense. And he did have 3 on the ground and 3 passing there against Florida this past week. But they really started to showcase some improvements in this passing game in the last 2 weeks. Tennessee, of course, they got blown out in that one, but they were still efficient and had 300 yards, 72% completion rate, 349 yards, 3 touchdowns, 11 yards per attempt. It's pretty much the high mark on the year for them. They had 12.5 against Southern, but who cares? But against Florida, they really got this passing game going. Started to attack downfield a little bit more, which is good to see. I want to start seeing them, call more, intermediate, the deep throws, because they have ballers in the receiving court. Keyshawn Boutte finally getting involved just a little bit. He gets 23 receptions, which is actually second on the team. He's been very quiet this year. Malik Neighbors, though, he's phenomenal. Brian Thomas, Jeray Jenkins, Mason Taylor, a freshman's got involved a good bit this year. This is a very versatile receiving core. You got Chris Hilton as well. It's very versatile. Kyron Lacey, you can go on. Jack Beach, another one. He's a heck of a ball player, 6'2", 215. This is a great offense in terms of talent. You look at running back, too. Josh Williams, Armani Goodwin, he appears to be coming back for this game. He has 5 touchdowns in 4 games this year. Noah Kane, John Emery, they've split the carries pretty evenly. Those running backs have between 34 and 49 carries, all 4 of them. So they're really dishing it out and around. Biggest problem is, how will this offensive line do? They've just been very poor this year, very young. Health hasn't exactly been on their side either. They're, facing a defense. It's not really good against the run, but, they have an interesting pass rush, but still trying to figure things out. You got 2 true freshmen at the tackle positions. You have a transfer, and Miles Frazier at the guard spot. So this offensive line, they've just been awful this year, despite having great legs at quarterback and Jaden Daniels who can really evade pressure. They've still struggled to protect, and that's something that might change here in this game. Their pass rushing unit for Ole Miss, I think it's pretty impressive, but they should be able to win on the ground running the ball. And now they're playing with a little bit more confidence, it seems, this past week against Florida. I think they might start to put things together on the offensive side of the ball. Look at the Ole Miss defense, giving up a little over 17 points per game, 346 yards per contest. The run defense has been not very good. They played Auburn this past week, a team that's offensive line has been very poor, don't have a passing attack one bit, and they ended up giving up 300 yards to a one-dimensional offense. He should have been able to slow down the run, no problem. 4 touchdowns allowed in that game. They only have up 3 rushing touchdowns on the year before that. They did get scorched against Tulsa for 262. Performed pretty well against Kentucky, another team that had a pretty awful offensive line, at that moment in time. So that might be a matchup they look to take advantage of. Chris Rodriguez is hard running, but they averaged less than 3 yards per carry in that game. So the run defense, it's been a problem for, a handful of years here at Mississippi State. But I do like the pass rush potential. Kahari Coleman coming over TCU, he's been great. Jared Ivey, Georgia Tech, 4.5 tackles for loss for him. J.J. Pigas at defensive tackle, that's a good player for them. Tavius Robinson, I'm kind of still looking for some of these other guys like Cedric Johnson to step up. I think the talent is certainly there for Ole Miss's defense, but over the first 7, they've just not been very good. They do have 19 sacks. Numbers are a little bit skewed. They didn't have any against Vanderbilt. They did have 3 against Auburn and Kentucky, though, so I do think that's pretty notable. They did have 7 against Georgia Tech, though, so, again, I think it's a little bit skewed. A lot of those numbers really are because they had 4 against Troy as well. But, they've been pretty solid in the 2 SEC games I just mentioned. Troy Brown coming over, he's terrific. Central Michigan transfer, 52 tackles, 4 pass breakups. He's good in coverage, sideline to sideline running back or two, 6'1", 220. I really like what Troy Brown brings to the table, but the run defense has just not been there for me right now, and I do think that they have a pretty good matchup edge against this offensive line. But if the O-line starts to get things in sync, which is certainly possible, then they could be in for a pretty big day. So it's going to be interesting to watch what happens with them. 202 yards per game allowed through the air. It's a veteran secondary for Ole Miss. I like this unit. A.J. Finley, he's their top tackler right now. Asheem Young coming over from Iowa State. Otis Reese, Tasheem Johnson, he's one of the younger guys at nickel. But, top to bottom for the most part. Miles Battle, I don't believe he's starting right now. But, there's a lot of veterans in the secondary. They've been pretty good so far. This is probably their biggest test by far, though. Kentucky had some big plays through the air, completed 75%. And then, that's really it. They have not been tested much through the air. It's going to change in this game. If they can find protection, LSU, I think they'll be able to win downfield. And I do think that's what will happen in this game. Looking at the LSU defense, though, unit's been, pretty sluggish, I think. But overall, respectable, 21.3 points per game given up, 338 in terms of yards. The 56.5% opponent completion rating, that's 21st in college football. Their pass rush has been very slow to get going, though. Only 3 sacks in their last 3 contests. That's not great, especially when you have guys like Ali Gay coming off the edge and, Jacqueline Roy in the interior, Makai Wingo, B.J. Ojulari. This D-line is one of the nation's best. I think they're great top to bottom. They've yet to really showcase that, though. I think this is a game where they could really step up. Ole Miss, their O-line, of course, has been great. But they're still facing an offensive line that has 2 redshirt freshmen at the tackle spots, and this is a big opportunity for them to win in this game. I do think this defensive line is going to have a pretty good game. Savion Jones as well. I like what Harold Perkins has done, the true freshman linebacker. He's 3rd on the team in tackles. Micah Baskerville, I don't think he was a starter at the beginning of the year, but he's up to 42 now. That is a team high. There's just talent top to bottom on this defense. Love what they bring to the table. Yeah, Baskerville, 0 tackles in game 1, and now he's up to a team high. So he's been doing some great work for them over the last couple of weeks. I like the move from Jay Ward over to safety. I think that better fits his skill set. He's certainly been playing very good ball. Mekhi Gardner, one of the transfers from ULL, he's got 4 pass breakups. Top to bottom, this defense has a lot of talent. I think they match up pretty well because this again, the passing attack for Ole Miss has not been very great. There's a lot of veterans in this secondary. There's so many transfers. I think there's like 6 or 7 transfers in the secondary. So this is a unit still looking to find their footing. I think this is a great opportunity to do so. It could also backfire, though. That could also lead to a lot of miscommunication. There's Florida State in week 1. They're winning a good bit. Auburn had a lot of big plays. They had 337 yards passing. Ended up winning that game after a resilient second half, but early on it was not great. One-on-one coverage on the outside against Tennessee. Overall, I think they played pretty good against the pass in that game, but, the score was too wide, so they kind of let their foot off the gas, but and they turned around this past week, Florida only 185 yards. Not great. That passing attack's not too special, but big test. This is the first big test of the year for Ole Miss's passing attack. first big test really of the year. Well, second, I would say, now for LSU. Because I think this is a game they can certainly compete in. They started off very poor against Tennessee, and those mistakes really piled up. And that was it was not a great opportunity, eventually to see what they could do. They played great red zone defense in that game against Tennessee. It could have been 21-0 instead it was 13-0. So I think that's another thing that's key against Lane Kiffin, especially a guy that loves to go for it on fourth down. I think that some crucial stops for LSU could really dictate how this game goes. Looking at the team comparisons, though, right now I think Jaden Daniels gets the edge at quarterback. Dart, I think he certainly has the potential to grow, but right now this year, passing attack's not clicking like it should be, and the way they want this offense to move. Running back, both teams are actually pretty deep, but I think the duo of Judkins and Evans, dominant duo. These guys are going to both have maybe 1,200-plus yards on the year. That's how good they've been. Great slashing duo. They still run the ball, and that's where they want to be. That's how this offense operates. That's how they move fast. Wide receiver, I think Ole Miss is pretty deep as well, but the LSU passing attack, they haven't been too spectacular themselves, but they're just as deep as they come at wide receiver. A lot of guys they need to start getting the ball to. Offensive line, pretty unanimous. Ole Miss, LSU, they've been very poor up front. But on defense, I give the edge to LSU across the board. The defensive line, I think they're one of the nation's best. They haven't exactly lived up to expectations this year, but I do think that is a phenomenal unit that could have a big matchup advantage here. They are giving up 145 rushing yards per game. Gave up 200-plus the last 2 weeks, and then, they give up 200-plus to Southern as well. I think they held up very well week one against Florida State, and then Auburn didn't have much going for them at all. So run defense has been very iffy, but they certainly have the potential to win these matchups. Linebacker as well. Micah Baskerville, phenomenal. Mike Jones, he's really good in coverage for them. Harold Perkins, Greg Penn, he's one of their top tacklers, I believe, as well. So they're just very stacked top to bottom. They're great on their 3 deep at linebacker. And then the secondary, I think they're also going to get the edge in terms of talent and, being one of the top teams in the conference. And opponent completion rate certainly helps out, while Ole Miss, they've kind of struggled, a good bit against the pass. Not too much, though. They're only giving about 61% completion rate. They've not really been tested too much, though. The game against Kentucky, I thought they struggled a good bit in. And then after that, they've just not had a good opponent. I guess Tulsa, that's a pretty respectable passing attack, but, they should look good in that game. So I'm going to give the secondary edge to LSU. Looking at the final analysis and the prediction, I think the biggest key for Ole Miss, find some big passing plays across the middle. Those seam routes, getting downfield. If you can start to do that, this running game is really going to take over. This offense is going to be clicking. It'll be hard to stop. For LSU, same for them. Limit the big plays on the ground, though. Stay hot through the air. Last week, I was very impressed with their passing attack, and there's a potential to continue to do that in this one. I'm going to take LSU to pull the upset, 34-30. I just think this Ole Miss offense just seems to be a little bit too one-dimensional, which is crazy to say because the passing attack has not been that bad, but I think in this matchup, it's going to be a little bit harder to run the ball the way they want to. I know LSU struggled, for the most part against the run here, but, I don't think they're really going to be threatened too much by this Ole Miss passing attack, here being at home. I think the offense is starting to find some rhythm. The offensive line, if they can hold up, which is going to be a tough, tall order against guys like Hari Coleman, but I think the offense, they're going to find their stride in this one. I think they're going to outscore Ole Miss. I think Brian Kelly's unit, they're going to step up in the red zone, force a handful of stops. That's going to be the deciding factor in this one. Going to be another great game. LSU, though, have them winning this one. First big test for Ole Miss. Now second, really, after the Kentucky game. A game they should have lost. LSU, I think they pick up the W here. It's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.